Hello, everyone. Dr. Stillman here with Amy Arp and Clark Engelbert. And tonight
Hello.
or today, this afternoon, whatever time it is, we are going to be talking about the importance of mineral balancing, common mistakes, and how to avoid them. So I'll lead off. So the importance of mineral balancing is if you don't balance your minerals, you are going to get sick and die young. It's going to be ugly. Most people are not talking about this, are not doing anything about it, don't understand it. It gets completely lost in translation in the integrative functional health and wellness space, which is why I think it's safe to say that Clark and I specialize in helping people who've been failed by at least one, sometimes dozens of functional and integrative practitioners, gurus, experts, etc. And it's not their fault. It's just that the training out there is really, really, it's skin deep. And that's part of why people are struggling so much and part of why we have such a strong, I feel like every day I'm talking to someone I've been to everyone, I've seen everyone, I've done everything. And sometimes they've gotten some value out of it. I'm not saying there's not value there, but it's just the beginning of the road. And one thing I always look for in practitioners is how long can you keep someone, making progress? Because what will usually happen is somebody will knock it out of the park in 3 to 6 months with somebody with some bread and butter, basic, easily found on the top of your health and wellness bookstore section in your local bookstore stuff. But then after that, it's like, well, what else have you got for me? And that's where the knowledge runs out. And also the sophistication of the approach just isn't there. And that's why mineral balancing is the best and is really what we rely on to get our people well in the medical practice as sort of the core and foundation of what we do.
Yeah, there's just a lack of depth, right? And that's basically what you were saying right there. And that, I think, might lead into pretty nicely like some of the big mistakes that people make on mineral balancing, which is that assuming that mineral balancing is even remotely similar to these other protocols that they've tried before, so that they think maybe, they might get quick results, or that, they've been through detoxification reactions before. I hear that a lot from people, and they're like, yeah, I'm totally ready for it. Not a big deal. It should be easy, right? And then we actually provoke metals from the tissues with mineral balancing, and the reactions are quite a bit different and more intense, I would say, for many people. So I think the first, I'd say probably the biggest area that I deal with, that we deal with our group coaching clients, and then I deal with my one-to-ones over the last couple of years, is dealing with healing reactions. And first, I would say, maybe to back up a little bit, it would be dealing with the expectations that people have about how quickly they're going to heal, what's going to happen, and having the correct mindset going into mineral balancing. And this sort of speaks to the long-term nature of this program, and understanding that, yeah, we can heal quite a bit more quickly than it took for the damage to occur over the course of your life. But it doesn't mean that mineral balancing is a quick fix. And for most people, to eliminate their entire toxic metal burden, which is a lot of what healing entails, it's going to take 2 to 3 years to be on this program consistently, doing it over that period of time. So having the expectation first, that this is a long-term approach, that's probably one of the bigger mistakes that I see people make, is thinking, well, it's just a couple months or like a month, because I've done detox teas or some other chelation gimmick or whatever.
Tell us how you really feel about it, Clark. Pulling zero punches. So
that, having that expectation first, or not having it, I would say, is probably the biggest mistake, at least the top 5.
Well, I think this is like just one of the biggest misconceptions, which is at the core of really what differentiates nutritional or mineral balancing from just nutritional replacement therapy, which is that this is a system. And so you have to have a systems-based mindset. And, an unsystematic approach would be, okay, we checked a blood magnesium level and it was low. Therefore, we will give magnesium. I can't tell you how many people come into the practice. They've seen lots of other doctors, done lots of other things. They're taking magnesium and their serum magnesium is still low, right? And you can always say, oh, well, you're not taking enough until the patient then gets diarrhea, in which case, newsflash, you've reached bowel tolerance. What else have you got,
All
right?
right.
And then the only way to replace that is for you to give them things like IVs. And otherwise, you have to get into, well, why is this person's magnesium chronically low? And this isn't really that big of a mystery. Poor dietary choices will drive it low. Excessive stress will drive it low. Without getting too deep into the weeds on all the different forms of stress and all the different dietary choices, right? That in a nutshell is why people end up with these recalcitrantly low magnesium levels. But what's remarkable in the hair, and you really only see this when you start looking at the hair, and I say this to patients now, it's because the hair is expressed from the body. So it's sort of an expression of your overall dynamics of your system, which might sound hokey and woo and out there and weird, but then you start actually prescribing or recommending supplements to people based on the hair, and you're sometimes blown away by the results you get that you weren't getting with standard low dose replacement therapy. I myself just got a hair test back with a high NA/K ratio, Clark, and I went back on Endomet after dabbling with some other protocols, and I was just blown away by how much better I felt on a higher dose of zinc, which is the second time I've told you that, right? But the thing is, you cannot get away with using these high doses of minerals. And to be clear, this is another thing that really differentiates mineral balancing. And we see this all the time, people making this mistake. Like somebody said to me recently, she said, well, I've been doing hair tissue mineral analysis and, nutritional mineral balancing for almost a year now, and I'm still not seeing the results I want. And I say, you've done 2 tests. That's half as many tests as I wanted. So if you were taking the supplements that were recommended in month at day 1 of working with me, beyond month 3, you were actually not doing what I wanted or recommended because your hair could have changed in a massive way. And then you're on the wrong protocol. It's actually pushing you in the wrong direction. And that's something people in the functional integrated medicine space don't really, I just see a lot of people, because at least the people who come to me, they're like, oh, well, I got my labs tested last year. It's like, last year, I'm sorry, if you ran a business, would you run it by looking at the numbers once a year?
Right.
Like when you balance your household checkbook, do you balance it once a year? Like, do you check your checking account on April 15th every year and that's it? No, you check it every week, every month. You have a cadence of accountability, which is critical.
Very true.
And that's so I'd say, you're definitely hitting at something that's really, really important, which is that there's a structure and a cadence and a rhythm to mineral balancing that is extremely important to adhere to. If you don't, you can end up, either not feeling like you should or feeling like you're not getting the results like you should.
It ends in failure.
Yeah.
You just can't supplement on the same protocol indefinitely.
Exactly. And so I don't know, probably define the top 3 mistakes that people make right now, which is improper expectations. Thinking that they can get quick results on this approach. Not going to happen. You can feel better. Actually,
you can get some really quick wins. But what's funny about this, Clark, is that you and I have an unusual expectation that we're not going to get quick wins because we tend to get so many difficult cases.
Yeah.
Most people, when I hear that somebody's new and hasn't done anything like this before, I get really excited. Like we recently had a case like this, 17 years old. He's young. He's healthy. This is his first real health setback. He's got a slam dunk, high copper, high metals already coming out. He's got a high NA/K ratio. I'm pumped. Like in 3 months, this guy's life could be completely different. But I also, set the expectation of, it's not just 3 months and the problems are gone. It's in 3 months, if we get you to 50%, then we still want to keep going, right? We want to make sure we really nip this problem in the bud.
Well, here's the interesting thing about this is that you always, what I feel like is a much smarter thing to do with people is under promise and over deliver always.
Yes.
But also it's not that that's necessarily like a strategy, but it aligns really well with mineral balancing because you can get people feeling actually quite good pretty quickly on mineral balancing. But the thing is, that's so unique about this approach is that once you feel good, that's usually a precondition for elimination of heavy metals, which means that you're going to feel bad right after that. Right. So you know, I love when people send me those messages. They're like, I cannot believe that this is working. I've gone through 100 different protocols and I've tried 100 different things, and this is actually working. And I'm actually very excited for that. But I always try to temper expectations and go, that's phenomenal, but you're going to start eliminating metals next. And that's when you might fall
not to rain on your parade, but the next part's not.
Yes. And that's the unique aspect of mineral balancing. It actually works to this end. So it is a bit of a roller coaster, right? But again, like setting the expectations and putting them in their proper context, very important. Understanding healing reactions. There's a sequence that goes that unfolds when you go through a healing reaction or detoxification. Understanding the sequence is really important. A lot of people do not understand that sequence at all. And I take a lot of time with my one-to-ones telling them, you are going to feel good and then you're going to feel bad. And that is a really jarring experience, because for so long, people have been looking for something to actually legitimately make them feel better, that they go, oh my gosh, I'm at this like peak. Can we just hold it here? Can we just hold it here? This is what I was looking for. And then they sort of fall off that peak a little bit, and that can be quite jarring.
Well, you can always drop the dose back, and usually people 100%. Will. But then the thing is, you know, how fast do you want to make progress? And a lot of people I see a lot of people who they're not comfortable with the uncertainty of like, what's the right dose? Well, you know, if we're more aggressive, you're more likely to make faster progress. And if we're less aggressive, you're not. And a lot of people I see this kind of deer in the headlights look of, I just want you to tell me what to do. And I think part of this process is really empowering people to be healthy and to optimize their well-being as like an active participant who's doing the work and who's making decisions, because, you know, I'll have these discussions with them, because the reality is, you know, if you're a single, like 25-year-old male with no dependents and you work a part-time job because you're, I don't know, you got a workers' comp settlement, you can afford to have some really bad days and you can afford to move faster than if you're, say, a stay-at-home mom of 6 with a husband, you know, and that's a real concern. And that's a real thing you have to talk people through when you're counseling them, because if you don't, then, you know, you can push people who really need to move slowly too fast.
So navigating the healing reactions is another massive issue that we talk about quite a bit with our group coaching people.
Yes.
I talk about this at length in my one-to-ones, but being able to navigate the healing reactions and doing so intelligently, you know, backing off your supplements, using detoxification procedures that we recommend to mitigate those symptoms of metal elimination. That is, you know, a huge mistake that people make. They underrate what they're going to have to do to mitigate those healing reactions or detoxification reactions that are going to come up. Right? That's huge. But going back to your point before about mineral balancing being structured, it's very structured. There's a very distinct sequence that we go through when we analyze the test. We put a person on a protocol for 2 to 4 months. And it's really critical that you do the retesting and you monitor how you feel so that you can back off your supplements as you need to, go through the protocols that we recommend for the healing reactions, retest when you need to, right? So that we can actually see the changes that have occurred and also see the metals that are being eliminated. But there's a problem in the mineral balancing space of there's a lack of seriousness here. There's a lot of clowns in this space that are just kind of like, you know, I'm gonna do whatever I want. And if you're going to do mineral balancing correctly and you're going to be successful at it, you have to pretty tightly adhere to the structure of it and doing the retests. And so there's a lot of people out there that just want to get creative with it and think, well, you know, I could do 1 test a year or 2 tests a year and it's fine. Or just keep taking the same supplements, you know, longer than what Dr. Stillman or Clark recommends. And you're
adding a bunch of supplements as well, like adding their own on top of mineral balancing.
So I'm comfortable doing that sometimes, but the reality is I always cycle it. and B, I have a lot of experience using those supplements.
But you retest a lot.
Yeah.
as well.
No, I was talking about in clients club.
Yeah, same, exactly, same. But that is like that's an individual decision that we make with clients one-to-one that we work with. But the general advice, I think, to people out there that aren't in this space or like interested in this, they really, I think, need to understand that there's a distinct structure and you have to follow it. And I've been doing this now for a really long time myself personally.
How long is it now, Clark?
I've been on a mineral balancing program for 10 years, over 10 years.
Yeah,
and I've been doing it professionally now for 5. And
what proportion of your life is that now, Clark?
That's a quarter of my life.
Talk about committed.
Yeah. So I've been through every possible permutation of, let me try this. Let me try doing it with keto. Let me try chelation. Let me try anti-parasitic drugs. Let me try whatever, right? And every single time I have gone off the path a little bit and tried to experiment, it's backfired quite a bit.
So it's really funny you say this. We ordered some product from a company that shall remain nameless. And I told Michelle, I said, it's my wife, for those of you who don't know, said to her, she's like, what are we going to do with this stuff? Because it ended up being like shipped to, like, a patient ordered it by accident, but then we'd had the wrong links that we sent to them. So we ended up sort of owning it and buying it back from them. Anyway, she's like, what are we going to do with this? I'm like, I'll take it. And when it doesn't work or do anything for me, I'll just talk smack about it on social media. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is that we do get a lot of questions about what we call, shiny objects, things that are not really going to move the needle. Although it's kind of funny when you think about it, all minerals and metals can be shiny objects. It's a little funny to call mineral balancing not a shiny object. But my point is, like, a person asked me recently about neural therapy. And, I've seen neural therapy. I've done training on it. I've never actually practiced it. But I look at what it is and I think, for the money and the time, because you got to go to a practitioner, you got to show up multiple times for treatment. You've got to sit there. You've got to be injected. Like, if I was worried about or concerned with something very specific that was really good for, then sure. But so many people are coming to us and they say, well, I have to make this a sustainable approach that I can do for 6 months, a year, to basically get the job done. And we'll see them going to other practitioners who do, like, interventions like neural therapy, ozone, hyperbarics. Again, nothing wrong with these things. We'll add them all the time in appropriate cases. I've recommended hyperbaric oxygen, for example, to 2 people in the last month with great results in at least once. And I'm looking forward to hearing back from the other. But, like, this is foundational, because if the minerals are off, truly nothing else works. If the body is inundated with, loaded with heavy metals, nothing is going to work or function optimally. And that's why, when somebody's floundering around, for example, in the practice, not doing well, not making progress, the first thing I do is, when was the last hair test? What did we do?
Yeah.
Are you taking the supplements? Are you doing the lifestyle things that we know work? Because invariably it's, well, I only did 2 tests in the last year, or I haven't done one in 6 months, or, I didn't get the supplements shipped to me because, I mean, I couldn't believe this. We had somebody say, do the test. And then she said, like, my life's too busy and hectic. I can't take the supplements right now, which I sympathize with. But if your life is that hectic and crazy, you need to make hard choices about what your priorities are, because we see a lot of people, they run their engine at 9,000 RPM, and Jim likes to say, if you do not slow down, you will be forced to slow down. You either choose to and do it on your terms, or you do it when your body says no.
Right.
So,
but I think, going to your point there about, retesting a little bit, I think we're recommending the retesting, not like for our own enjoyment or because we love, taking people's hair or anything like that. It's that when you you get to track, like, the changes that we say that we can induce by giving you supplements and putting you on the protocol that we're putting you on, right?
You can see your progress.
It's verifiable. Like, the changes, like if someone has a low sodium potassium ratio, and we give them limcomin, right, to bring up their sodium potassium ratio, we can use the next test to see, oh, did the limcomin work to the end that we were using it for on that retest? Did that also cause shifts in the metal levels? Did the metal levels go up? We also get to see heavy metal eliminations take place in real time, right? Which is another very important aspect of this approach that I think differentiates it from almost every other metal detoxification approach, which is that we can actually verify and show you that you're eliminating a heavy metal, right? How many other gimmicky detox approaches are there out there that say, take this detox tea or this cilantro or chlorella and you can detox your metals, but have fun with that. We're not really going to track whether or not you're doing it, right? We're not going to verify that. That to me really differentiates this approach and makes it a lot more robust and actually scientific. And so the retesting is, if you're not, like, people come to me all the time and they say, well, I had a test a year ago, can we use it? Or, you know, I wasn't, any number of things that people say. And it's like, if you're not doing the retesting, you know, you're probably actually not doing mineral balancing after a certain point, right? If you're staying on the same stuff. The other thing about this as well is that to the extent that the mineral patterns change because of the supplement protocol that we put you on, you could, in theory, overshoot on correcting those imbalances that we see on the first test if you go too long in between testing and changing protocols. So that really gets into bioindividuality. And when I work with people one-to-one, especially initially, we don't know how mineral balancing is going to hit you individually. Some people are stuck in patterns for 6 months, 9 months, a year on mineral balancing before something shifts.
And they have to be prepared for that. And what's remarkable about it is that even though they may be stuck in that hair pattern, they may see profound improvements in how they feel and function, which sometimes I think stakes them out. They think, well, how can this be working if I'm not seeing changes in my hair? But, you know, I call that being stuck deeply in a pattern.
Yes.
And you have to just work to get them out of it.
And that to me, like, if someone is stuck in sympathetic dominance or 4 lows or something for like up to a year when they're on a protocol, that to me says something about the chronicity of that pattern and how long it took for them to get to that place on that first test. And usually what it means is they've been in sympathetic dominance for years leading up to that first test that we actually ran to view the pattern, right? So that's another aspect of this that's, you know, kind of interesting and on the cutting edge, the time cycles idea. And, you know, but it relates directly to shifting in the patterns or not shifting in the patterns after being on a program. But that's an aspect of this in the beginning that we don't really know. We can't see into the future, right? And so we don't know how, you know, X person is going to respond versus Y person. Some people, they bust out of 4 lows in one test on one retest. And that can then dramatically shift the supplement protocol that we're going to recommend for them. And if you stay on the same 4 lows protocol, when you come out of 4 lows, you will feel worse when that pattern shifts on the hair test.
Well, a lot of that is just the fact that people get comfortable with familiarity rather than with comfort. And they flee sometimes even sometimes, you know, it's remarkable. You see people running away from things that are obviously good for them. And in the same way, any shift in their mental state that can be attributed to mineral balancing, they'll resist it because it's not, it's new, it's novel, it's different. It's shifting them. And people can become very uncomfortable with that. You know, there's a lot of, you know, stories, anecdotes of people having pretty profound personality shifts as a result of this. I know you've seen that plenty, Clark. We see it actually regularly.
Yeah, this is something I was thinking about last night, but you know, mineral balancing is going to force you to energetically confront all of these difficult things that you've been through in your life, maybe belief systems that you have that are improper or incorrect, and not serving your health. Basically, when I say, you know, a belief system isn't correct, it means that it's not helping you move forward with your health. right?
It's
So if
also
you have a
not
lot of,
perhaps in a fundamental sense compatible with how your biology is. And, that's something that's really, people are moving the goalposts right now in society on what's normal and what's healthy. And it's really sick. And that's part of why they're doing it, is they don't understand how, just as one component of our toxic environment, toxic heavy metals are essentially degrading the human being and thereby society, which is part of why you
shifting
tend
the
to
norms.
see, it's just part of why you tend to see people in this space adhering to traditional societal norms, because it makes sense when you're properly nourished, and you can be convinced or brainwashed into anything when you are nutritionally and, what's the word I'm looking for? When you're nutritionally imbalanced.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
but
another pitfall that you guys can touch on is the lifestyle piece, that if people are only doing supplements, but they're not willing to change their diet and lifestyle, just talk a little bit on what that does for people.
Oh boy. Yeah. I was talking about this on a call the other day. When you look at the nutritional component, well, when you just look at raw nutrient and micronutrient intakes from your diet, if you're eating a carefully crafted, curated diet, which I encourage everyone to do, you can already achieve a significant daily intake of micronutrients like minerals and vitamins. And then if you add mineral or vitamin supplements on top of that, you can, go to 2 or 3x times what you would have normally taken in with your diet. And what that also means is that if your diet is a dumpster fire of poor decisions, then you're only getting to like half of what you need with the mineral supplements. But who could possibly take all of those pills in order to make up the optimal intake, particularly to get people out of the hole that they dig themselves in because of long-standing nutritional deficiencies and mineral imbalances. So, I mean, you have to have at least something approximating an ideal diet, and you can deal with a lot of, you can really stray from ideal pretty far and still get results. But that's, for many people who are looking to get to the next level, one of the things we'll work hardest with them on is really dialing in macros, really carefully picking food so that they're getting, as much of the right micronutrients as possible from their diet to complement the minerals they're already taking.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and Jim talk about this quite a bit, but if you're chronically stressed out and you're in an active fight or flight state, it's difficult to move forward on this program. Part of the pathology of like mineral imbalances and heavy metal bioaccumulation is that you're chronically stressed and you're in a chronically stressed out state. The activation of the stress response burns through your minerals, which makes you more susceptible to accumulating heavy metals. In order to reverse that process, we might be able to, in certain people, mitigate ongoing damage, or we could maybe stop progression of things getting worse. But to actually go back through a lot of these old issues and imbalances that you have to slow down. That's not negotiable. Especially if you're sick, if you're overtly sick, then that's even more not negotiable, right? And I have a lot of people who, I have a couple of good examples of like executives coming to me saying, I'm not well, but I'm working 80 hours a week and I want to do this program. And it's like, I had a guy who, this is a really cool and interesting case that I had, but he was unhappy with the results he was getting with this approach. And I said, well, it's because you're working 80 hours a week. So what do you expect? Number one. And so I told him, if you don't have to go be a monk in the Himalayas, right, and detach from society and just do this program, but take a lower position at your company if you can right now, if you can financially swing that. And he could. And he was working 40 hours a week instead of 80. And on the very next hair test, he started to eliminate mercury. As soon as that shift happened. So,
we just had someone saying, the same person I alluded to earlier, saying, I've been on this for a year and I'm not seeing results with only 2 tests. And it's like, you've got to slow down. You've got to relax. You've got to have slow, quiet time for you, time for family, time for, I think a lot of that's one reason why mind body medicine can be so powerful for people. I mean, I'm really convinced. I would love to do hair testing on people doing really intensive mind body medicine work, because I'd really love to see if that alone can drop or increase mineral or metal levels in the hair. But I wouldn't doubt it, because of this very common theme of, if people are not taking care of themselves psychologically, if they're not relaxing, if they're not taking time, if they're working too hard, if their stress levels are too high, you just don't see anything work. And that's something that, we have a 45-minute conversation with everyone who wants to join the practice, to set expectations like that. Because if somebody comes in who's, like I've got a lot of people like that, but I've got a number who are just very disinterested in the lifestyle changes. And I'm very clear with them, hey, you're not going to get the results that you really want. I'm not going to get you to optimal, but I can get you out of bad, dark places. What I've found is that I, tend to end up using things like bioidentical hormones in those cases. And there's to a certain extent, I feel a certain moral hazard of, like, their body is trying to say no, and I'm then using bioidentical hormones to enable them to say yes. And am I actually doing them a disservice by doing that? And I try to have that conversation with them, but a lot of people are not ready for it.
Right. Well, that sort of speaks to, I think, the shiny object thing that people are, enamored with, but also it's kind of difficult to actually really heal and reverse these imbalances. And you are going back to what we were talking about a little bit before. You're going to have to confront things inside of you that you've repressed consciously, or suppressed consciously, or repressed unconsciously. Like, these things are going to come up on this approach, and that's a big reason why people quit. Their deeply held beliefs are often challenged on this approach, and if you're not willing to let them go or change your mind and be open-minded, I think you'll have a hard time on this program. And that's a big mistake that people make when they come into this. And like, to give an example, from my own experience on this program, I had a lot of resentment and unforgiveness towards people in my life for a long period of time. And I was unwilling to let that go. And that sort of hampered my progress on this approach. So when I let that go and came to a point where I knew I was stuck on this program, and things were coming up that I didn't want to feel. And they were, these things were sort of challenging what I thought I believed.
Right.
I kind of gave up at a certain point and said, well, okay, maybe I'll just try forgiving these people, because I've tried everything else and I'm on the verge of quitting the program. So let's just see what happens. And that worked.
And this is why we will pair this with EMDR and neurofeedback. Very powerful at unlocking results. When I started doing it, the mineral balancing protocols, I had just started neurofeedback, and I was very impressed. I'll never know what did what, but I mean, we refer for neurofeedback pretty regularly, but I mean, when you put this together with neurofeedback, together with EMDR, and you're willing to actually do the work, it's an unbelievable combination.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's great. Can we get into a couple of the questions that we have from this week? And then with whatever time we have left, we can keep going. So we had a question from someone in one of the HTMA programs, and they are asking, what are your thoughts on hydrogen tablets as a supplement? Are there added benefits of using them while on the mineral balancing protocol?
I want to hear Clark's thoughts on this.
I was going to say I want to hear yours, because I haven't really looked into this.
I'll give you my story on this. So I remember going to A4M. The first time I went to A4M, they had a long part of their conference theme was hydrogen gas. And for people who don't know, H2 is a gas that can be produced, and hang on, actually, no, I'd have to go look up and see exactly what chemical species it is. But I mean, it's called hydrogen water, hydrogen gas that you can inhale. There's a lot of different delivery mechanisms. It took off, I don't know, 7-8 years ago, and really hasn't slowed down. And it's a free radical scavenger, and anything that's a free radical scavenger, everyone in health and fitness will sort of go googly-eyed over, because, oh my gosh, it's got to do something. And that's basically true. I mean, it will do something. But then your challenge is, okay, well, do we really think we should put everyone in the world on it? And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, because it's a really high bar, and there's only a few things where I'm open to that, because for the most part, everything is situational and context dependent.
Mhm.
So with hydrogen, I look at it, and I looked at it for a long time and spent a lot of time trying to read papers and figure out, okay, when do I use this clinically? And no one had a clear answer. It just seemed like, well, we just give it to people and they feel better. And I'm
See what
like,
happens.
okay, great. I could give everyone cocaine and Adderall and more coffee and have them feel better. This isn't like a rational use of a therapeutic.
Right.
And my big thing when I talk to patients about therapeutics is, when it comes down to it, anything you use therapeutically, you're either treating a number or you're treating a symptom. So you take magnesium for sleep, your symptom is insomnia. You take magnesium to fix a serum magnesium level, which is a real marker for premature death and disability, very well established in the literature. You're trying to fix a number. And sometimes you don't feel numbers. Nobody comes back to me, practically speaking, after starting 5,000 IU of vitamin D a day and says, oh my gosh, everything's better. It's a subtle, a subclinical effect. So when I look at hydrogen water, I think, what number am I treating, or what symptom am I treating? And if you feel like it relieves symptoms, that's great. My bias, based on my experience, is that you can overdo anything, and I'm just not sure how you overdo it with hydrogen water. So I've yet to find a case where somebody was doing tons and tons and tons of hydrogen water and stopping it, or gas, or whatever delivery mechanism you want. I've yet to find a scenario where they were using too much and stopping it was the solution. But not a lot of people end up using it that much, because it actually winds up being expensive, and it's also not that convenient, because you have to, make the water, or you have to, and so it just is like an extra step that I see getting in the way of people using it. So that's my spiel on that. Clark, your thoughts?
I need to look into it. Basically, I've heard about it a little bit, but I think most of what you said, especially in terms of it being a free radical scavenger, is true.
Yeah.
But like the antioxidants that people have been hyping up, like resveratrol and some of the others, are, they're free radical scavengers as well, but they're sort of superficial. They don't do as much.
Well, the thing that people need to realize is that, yes, you can scavenge free radicals with glutathione and hydrogen and this and that and the other thing. But the better question is, why do you have excess free radical production? And the cause of free radical production in the body is heavy metals, including the transition elements that are nutritional in nature, like iron, which is why, we'll routinely recommend that people go donate blood, because we see that they get iron overloaded. And so, this lack of appreciation for, yes, you can take this antioxidant supplement in order to, improve your recovery from everything from hangovers to exercise to whatever you may happen to you, or you may be afflicting you. But at the end of the day, the root cause of the problem is toxin accumulation within the body, which is getting in the way of optimal metabolic functioning, et cetera, et cetera. And so getting rid of those things by replacing the minerals that those metals are displacing is where we see people getting the most mileage in terms of, achieving optimal health and wellness.
Yeah, exactly. Let's remove the source of the inflammation so that you don't need to remedy yourself to death.
Yeah. And that's, why this is, our goal is really the deepest level of healing possible.
Yeah, that's great. Another question, someone was asking, do you find that people have a hard time digesting the tablets from Endomet?
No.
Not really. I mean, there's the off person that will have, who comes to us with really significant digestive issues. But in that case, what you can do is crush them up and put them into something.
Right.
Pre-digest them. Right. If you want to get really extreme with it, you can chew them up. That's not something that most people want to do, but if you're concerned about that,
especially not some of them.
Yeah. Especially not some of them. So, either chew them, that's, the extremist solution, or you can just, crush them up. And that's what we do with a lot of kids, is especially, autistic kids and kids that are developmentally delayed. They're extremely picky, and we got to find a way to get those supplements into them. a lot of those parents were having them crush those supplements up, put them in like a yogurt or a smoothie or whatever gets them into them.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
But there is, maybe to go off on a little rant here for a minute, a lot of people are, I don't know what's going on, but they want things to be so comfortable and so optimized perfectly for them. Because I think we live in this world now where everything is like optimized so perfectly that, tablets versus capsules, some of them are big, some of them are not. Find a way to make it work. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I want to, because we have a question in the comments here on StreamYard that I won't display for the purposes of anonymity on these social media platforms that we're streaming to. But the question is really about, what about neurofeedback or EMDR for somebody who's got neurodevelopmental delay? And it's a great question. There is a very specific therapy that I've heard wonderful things about for people who've got this or who've had really severe head trauma. And it's called MERT. It's magnetic E-resonance therapy. And it's a type of transcranial magnetic stimulation. And I've heard amazing things about it for people. And that's what I would look into. Yeah, I think...
Say the name of that again for everybody.
MERT. It's magnetic resonance therapy or magnetic E-resonance therapy. So it's I've heard good things from people who've had kids who were affected by that. Well, actually, not just kids, but veterans. So yeah,
it's a good resource. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a great option. I've actually considered, how could I integrate that into what I do? But that would be a big shift from what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another question we had from someone in the program. So someone's asking, if you have someone in a double or triple calcium shell with high magnesium and sympathetic dominance, how much Megapan would you be giving this person?
That's a good question because oftentimes in sympathetic dominance, we don't want to overload people with super stimulating supplements, even if they're in slow oxidation. So, but if someone's in a calcium shell and a magnesium shell, they oftentimes will feel much better on higher doses of Megapan and like thyro complex, as an example, because their depression is really a result of this massive amount of calcification and the combination or co-occurrence of the adrenal burnout. I'd have to see that test to see exactly. But if someone's in a really significant calcium shell, like over 300 milligrams %, there's another sort of threshold that it gets to where you can play around with more Megapan and thyro complex, but that's a case by case basis. Certainly. And if they're in 4 highs, that you have to be careful with that. But where there's this pattern called the petrified pattern. It's kind of like an extreme version of the calcium shell. I believe it's calcium 350 milligrams % or above. And when people get into that range with the calcium shell, there's often significant depression. And, using more Megapan and thyro complex in that situation, like 222 each, can be really helpful. But yeah, if they're in sympathetic dominance at the same time, it can be, you really have to judge it on a case by case basis. But that's a really good question.
And then another question, can cloudy urine be a product of metal elimination or retracing or something?
Absolutely. It's one of the more common ones, actually. One of the most common.
One of the things that convinced me that this was not just some kind of, hippy dippy out there weirdness, like so much in the integrated medicine space, is that one of the first people I talked to who tried the mineral balancing protocols with Clark, actually, someone I'd known before I met Clark. He said, yeah, some really weird, funky smelling things were eliminated from my body and my urine. And I thought that's, I know it's in these supplements and I know that's not what is not what's coming out.
Right. Exactly. We have to understand the organ of elimination, the kidneys, right? To understand like cloudy urine and metals. There's 2 ways that we can think about this. Number one, metals bioaccumulate preferentially or first in the liver and kidneys in the human body. So that's number one. Number two, the liver and kidneys are the two main organs of excretion for heavy metals and other toxic chemicals and other types of toxicants. So when and if you have elimination symptoms, it's very reasonable to expect that you will have symptoms associated with liver and kidney, not abnormalities, but symptoms, related to those two organs, right? And cloudy urine, I'd say probably one of the most common symptoms of aluminum elimination is cloudy urine. And aluminum is primarily eliminated through the kidneys. So there's also metal specific symptoms that can be associated with this. Some metals are more likely to be eliminated through the liver and the bowels than they are like the kidneys. But yeah, it's one of the most common symptoms of heavy metal elimination on this program. And another good reason, right? We say something like this, verify it with the retest. If you have cloudy urine, I've had a lot of clients now, one-to-one clients recently who've had this symptom. I've had this symptom myself as well. And I go, what is going on here? I get my retest and the aluminum is off the charts. It's part of putting the pieces together of this puzzle for a lot of people to actually verify that what we're saying is true and real.
Yeah, that's good. We have a question. Were you going to say something?
No, I totally agree with Clark.
Great. I was going to say there's a question in the chat. We've been talking about this kind of the first half of this, but
it's a great
what have you seen helps people be with the process of when they're not seeing results as fast as they want, especially if in sympathetic dominance?
Yeah, what helps people be patient with the process? Yes, this is a great question. Number one is, one of the things I've learned is that people don't mind when you're wrong, and they don't, because everyone is going to be wrong about something. They don't mind when you're wrong, and they don't mind when your process is long, convoluted, difficult, complex, requires an investment of time, money, whatever. They don't mind that. They understand that great results should take time. There's no shortcuts. There's no quick fixes. Everyone understands that intrinsically. I mean, unless you're really confused, which does happen from time to time. But what they really respect is your ability to predict what's going to happen, because that means that your mental model of the world lines up with reality. And they're really looking for a map, a clear roadmap out of the current straits that they're in, right? So when you have a conversation up front with them where you explain, here's why you failed everything else you did. They were shiny objects that were really just tire patches. You got another 20, 30, 40 miles, 6 months, 6 years, 10 years out of that. Now the root cause is deeper, you're worse off, and it's going to take longer to recover. This is not a quick fix. This is the deepest level of work you can do to get to the roots of what's really ailing you. And it works this way. And here's what you can expect. And here's why you can expect that. Because you didn't get this way overnight, because heavy metals are extremely toxic, because nutritional imbalances with high copper, low zinc, toxic manganese, chromium, all the things we see coming out of people, these things have real consequences, and the body's a really big potential space. And because it's a big potential space, it can take a long time to really cleanse it of all this stuff. And the body has its own schedule. You're not just going to say, hey, get rid of all of the mercury. And the reason why is that if your body was able to do all of that, it would not end well, because that is very, very toxic. So the body's very careful with what it eliminates and when. And you have to trust the body's timing. And I'll often use the analogy of baking a cake. People have this idea of, well, I want to do it faster. And what do you want? What do you do when you want to cook something faster? You turn up the heat. Well, everyone can verify this on their own. If you try to bake a cake on your grill on high, it's not going to taste the same as if you bake it at the temperature it's supposed to be baked at in an oven. Really and just in the same way, if you try to beat the icing into the batter before you bake the cake, it's not going to come out the same. You have to have patience. You add the icing when the cake is cooled. And that's just part of the deal. And when you explain this to people, they understand it. They say, you know what, you're right. That is how nature works. That does make sense with my understanding and experience of the world. Why don't more people think this way? I can deal with that so long as you'll be there every step of the way to help me through whatever ends up happening. And you won't, quit on me and throw in the towel and say, well, maybe this just isn't going to work for you. Because at the end of the day, everyone I've seen succeed, they were compliant with this program and they didn't drop off. They didn't fall off the wagon, at least for very long. And they were willing to get right back on when they started to go backwards or see progress disappear. So
for me, it's four things. It's number one, brainwash yourself with looking at all of the testimonials and case studies that I post on my account, and that, we have posted of our group coaching successes, and see that other people are actually getting really good results with this. Yeah. And many of those case studies that I'm posting, especially, they're coming after people have been on a program for 6 months, 9 months, sometimes a year. I had a guy who started on this approach 2 years ago, and he was not eliminating metals for almost 2 years. And he was persistent and diligent. He believed in this program so deeply that he's like, I don't even care that I'm not getting the results, Clark. I feel better, but I'm just going to keep going. And he was massively rewarded just recently with a huge aluminum elimination, kind of out of nowhere. So there is sort of a mysterious aspect to this. We don't always know.
What number did he get to, Clark?
He got up to his aluminum levels in the poor eliminator range, but it went up to like 2.8 from that.
There we go.
Wow.
We go.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
After 2 years of just plugging away, he was in 4 lows the entire time.
He felt much better, right?
He felt much better. We had to tweak some things in his lifestyle. Like I had him quit a second job that he had been working. He couldn't financially do that. And he got to this point. We actually, I talked with him on a group call that I have on my office hours for nutritional analytics. And, I introduced him and used him as a really good example of trusting in the timing of the program as well. So
it's really not the timing of the program, it's the timing of the body.
Yes.
And really honoring. And this is what's so different about this because the conventional medical approach is like, well, we're going to make the body do what we think it should do right now because we know better than this incredibly finely tuned, wildly complex thing that we struggle to fully quantify.
Right. So
that's why we spend $4.4 billion a year on healthcare, which is 14,000 per capita. And we have some of the worst health statistics in the world. But anyway, back to you, Clark.
Yeah. Exactly. So it is a matter of seeing that other people are being successful in this approach. That can be really helpful. Number 2 is cultivating a belief that this actually is going to work, which I think falls in line with that first thing. It's pretty important to have that, and understanding, I think, the intricacies and all the details of the program. That is what sort of kept me around, because I was like, well, this sounds cool. It's very compelling. But I also had this deep, deep curiosity of, well, what's going to happen when I eliminate aluminum or lead or mercury? How am I going to feel different? That, to me, kept me going. So having that belief in not only the issue of the toxic metals problem, but the mineral balancing itself to resolve that, and understanding how ionic mimicry works. You don't have to understand the details, but there's a lot of really solid science behind this that you can use to help cultivate a belief in the program. So that's number 2. Brainwash yourself with the testimonials and case studies if you can. Cultivating a belief in the program kind of goes along with that, and looking at all of the different science behind what we're talking about. Dr. Wilson would talk about preferred minerals, and I was like, well, does this really exist outside of this little siloed website of information? And I went on a little hunt for that concept in the literature. Oh, it does exist. It's called ionic mimicry. It's got a different name.
Right.
So there's a depth that you can also kind of dive into to help cultivate that belief. but then falling in love with the process as well. And I think this is probably a little easier for
Because
people
you
that have
feel better on the minerals. I mean, like, that's
Yes.
why I keep doing this.
Exactly.
And on that note, I have to run, guys, but
Yeah, I've got to go too.
and I think that about wraps it up. We could talk
Yeah.
about that all day.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's good.
All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Take care. Have a great day. We'll be back next week.
Bye.
Bye.